Welcome to Real Women's Stories. Today's topic, we are going to be talking the menopause.
And I put on 2-3 stone to the point where my son's friend thought that I was pregnant, which was quite mortifying. Suddenly my hair was falling out, literally in clumps, where the shower and the hoover was constantly clogged up. I had acne that was worse than when I was a teenager.
I have so many people that I'm talking to about their symptoms, about when they started their menopause, what the menopause is about. So I really wanted to talk about the menopause, how it can affect us in the workplace, how we navigate our work journey, because all of our symptoms can affect how we feel and how we show up in our workplace, and also how food can affect our hormones.
Because one thing that I found shocking was that spinach, that's a green leafy thing for your keto or for your Mediterranean diet, but actually you don't want that if you are histamine intolerant.
I honestly cannot believe that more people aren't talking about this. When you go through the menopause, there's a chemical imbalance that happens in your gut. And when you eat certain foods that have a high histamine content, that your body can have a reaction. So for me, this was a massive light bulb moment. This is Real Women's Stories. The menopause is such, first of all, it's a hot topic, but it's something that really has affected myself, and it's affecting all these women that I'm speaking to and I'm coaching at the moment. So I felt it was really important that we delve back into that conversation. Today, I'm interviewing Michelle Rowlinson. She is a menopause expert. She started going through the menopause in her early 30s. She's going to be here talking about her journey and also her findings of the way that food and our intolerances can really affect our menopause symptoms and our hormones. So if you're listening to this now, just put your headphones in and shut off the world outside. Tune in for the next 30 minutes because this episode is going to be inspirational, enlightening, and you and I are both going to learn so much more.
My journey started at 32. All of a sudden I'd gone from someone that was very slim. I liked cooking a lot, so everything was fresh, and I all of a sudden started putting on weight around my middle, and I put on 2-3 stone to the point where my son's friend thought that I was pregnant, which was quite mortifying. Suddenly my hair was falling out, literally in clumps, where the shower and the hoover was constantly just clogged up. I had acne that was worse than when I was a teenager, but also I was just getting brain fog to the point where I just couldn't function, or memory loss, where, because I'm a physio by trade, and I would look at my diary and I would get to the waiting room and I couldn't remember their name. And, the receptionist must have thought I was nuts, because I'd then go home and go, "Oh, I just need to check something," just trying to find the name of this. Obviously, if I'd seen them before, it wasn't a problem. But if it was a first appointment with a waiting room full of patients, I was like, oh my God. And it was just the mood swings and the heart palpitations, and not one health professional mentioned hormones. Not one. I was offered beta blockers, for my heart palpitations, which thank goodness I had the attitude of, well, will I die without them? My dentist gave me a lecture on oral hygiene when I was spending a lot of money to stop my teeth falling out, or
Wow.
a tooth, which I was like, I think that would have been the first thing I addressed before spending all this money to stop my teeth falling out. And even as a physio, I knew women were more predisposed to frozen shoulder, tendinopathies, joint pain, sort of 40 plus, but I didn't know why. And I even did an elective women's health placement because I knew there were sort of gaps in women's health knowledge. But even then, they didn't mention menopause. It was all pregnancy and prolapses and things. And when I finally realized what was going on, that's when I then sort of found about how anti-inflammatory diets can massively help reduce menopause symptoms, but we're just not told. That led to me writing my book with recipes, and it just spiraled from there. I just realized just how how failed women really are.
So you moved over from physiotherapy into menopause. So you started kind of researching it and then understanding a bit more about it. And so then you decided to write this book, and it was all about diets and food.
The book was kind of the initial bit where it's just like, wow, I knew about anti-inflammatory diets from a respect of, physio with joint pain, things like that. Didn't realize just how powerful it can be for many other conditions, particularly because estrogen affects our inflammation. So as it declines, we can struggle more with sort of inflammatory issues. So it makes sense why anti-inflammatory diets would help so much. But yeah, it was just more, I wanted to sort of make something that was more simple that women could follow, because a lot of these recipes are so confusing, some of them. And, I love to cook. And if it was putting me off, then, women that aren't necessarily, wanting to cook, it's going to put them off for sure. So, yeah, it's an amalgamation of sort of intermittent fasting advice, keto, Mediterranean, and then sort of exercise as well that can help as well.
A lot of people have heard of keto and heard of Mediterranean. Can you just give a few examples of the types of foods that are involved in those two different categories?
So Mediterranean's a lot easier to follow because it's less restrictive than keto. Keto is more sort of low carb, no sugar. So obviously, not having sort of the breads, pasta, things like that. So it's very much. I mean, I do mine. Not so, people think of keto as high fat. In my recipes, they're more sort of natural good fat. So like avocado, salmon, mackerel, things like that. So you're getting your good fats. I don't necessarily say, oh, you must have a high fat type diet. Mediterranean, you can have your pastas and beans, pulses, things like that. I think the thing with both of them, it's just about having a fresh diet that's not got processed foods, because it's the processed foods that cause the inflammation.
Okay.
So yeah, so it's just really, if you're cooking from scratch, then generally you're sort of on the right lines.
There's a clear message that comes through with any kind of healthy eating and consistently healthy eating is buy single source foods and start cooking with them. Don't buy processed foods, because a lot of the processed foods obviously and also have been sprayed, I would imagine, and some of the meats, that the way that the animals are fed, it's the hormones that are in the animals that can affect us. So we're learning a lot about our gut health, and what we're putting into our bodies will then really have an effect on how we feel and think and behave, and all of the symptoms that we're getting just in general life. It is just so interesting, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I teach in my workshops, because our hormones do react to, the hormones that are fed into the meat, the herbicides and pesticides that are estrogenic. And people, often ask, why are women suddenly complaining more about menopause? Well, one, we're able to talk about it, whereas before we'd either be put in an asylum or, so we used to sort of try and keep things quiet. But also our diet and lifestyle has changed dramatically. So whereas we were having a much more, meat and two veg type diet, we were more active type living. Now we're tending to just be sat on a laptop, not moving much, eating fast food, quick food that's often processed, or it's got herbicides, pesticides, all these things in it. And we've also got a lot more chemicals in general, called like endocrine disrupting chemicals, in all our products, our skincare, our cleaning products, things like that. So we are in contact with a lot more things that affect our hormones.
When we first spoke, the reason why our conversation sparked off was because I said, oh God, I'm histamine intolerant. And I had to understand what that meant, because all of a sudden my diet, I was eating, kimchi and nuts and lots of kind of jarred, pickled stuff, and, spinach, mushrooms. And all of a sudden I was told, no, you can't eat that. I'm like, well, why? And they were like, well, they're really high in histamine. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't understand what that means. And so if you could just explain what that means, because there may be some people that will have a similar reaction to what I had, which was the real itching and the inflammation. Like, how does histamine affect our bodies, and what type of foods should we not be eating, and what type of food should we be eating?
So we've got something called estrogen dominance, which often goes hand in hand with histamine intolerance because they share the same receptors. So often when you're estrogen dominant, the more estrogen you have, the more histamine, and then the more histamine, the more estrogen. So it often becomes a bit of a vicious cycle. And you're right, there's foods that are high in histamine that won't be helping. Equally, there's foods that have the enzyme that helps break it down, diamines oxidase, and things like bean sprouts. So you can actually have foods that can actually help as well to help break down histamine, because histamine's a really, it's a good thing for our body, but it's just when you've got obviously too much and you're not breaking it down as much. So, because one thing that I found shocking was that spinach actually, whereas obviously that's a green leafy
Yeah.
thing for your keto or for your Mediterranean diet, but actually you don't want that if you are histamine intolerant. The signs of being histamine intolerant is where you're suddenly getting new intolerances, or where you've never had hay fever before and you're suddenly starting to get hay fever, or
Yeah, I have problems with my sinuses, and they said that that was one big indicator of, I'm constantly blocked, even though I haven't got a cold. And I've even been to the doctor, and they're like, you need to keep using sprays. And I said, but I don't want to keep using sprays. But I'm sure it's my diet, and it's got to be something I'm eating. And you're right. Yesterday I had spinach, and I'm blocked up today. So it does. You have to, maybe people have to keep a food diary and then start eliminating some of these high histamine foods to see which you react to most. I remember I used to always cook with soy sauce. And when I found out the content of histamine in soy sauce, it was insane. It was absolutely insane. It's like 100 times more than eating spinach. And I was like, I'm having this every day because I thought it was healthy. And actually, I can have it in very small doses. I can't not have it anymore. And I think that's also very important to tell people, that just because you might be histamine intolerant, if you do strip back your diet, you can stop bringing foods back in again, just to see how you react to each individual food sauce that you're eating. Because you can, like me, I know I can have soy sauce, I know I can have spinach, but I know what my reactions will be. But I'm prepared for those reactions, that okay, today and tomorrow might be a bit blocked up, but they're not affecting my life. When I was itching, that was really affecting me, because I couldn't sleep, and I would wake up with scratches all over my neck and my chest, because it was quite severe. Yeah, thank you for that. That's really interesting. And the book that you've got your recipes in, what's it called?
Yumi Conquering Perimenopause and Menopause. And you can find it on Amazon.
A lot of the work that I'm doing is with women within the working environment, and to give them that emotional support and that personal development in their personal life so they can show up. And lots of times when we first start out on our discovery calls, we have to understand where someone's health is at that point. And what generally gets brought up when we discover is that potentially that person could be perimenopausal. So not only are you navigating your personal life and all those challenges, you also have your perimenopause or menopause to deal with, which heightens all of your emotions and all of your feelings. And how the hell do we show up in our workspace when we're really feeling crap, low, anxious? How do we do that? How do you educate people, and how do you kind of go on that journey with people as well?
The key word there is educate, because we're not educated enough about menopause and how we can sort of manage it, because often we're left to believe, oh, it's just one of those things women have to put up with. And actually there is a lot that you can do, whether that's through HRTs, whether that's through diet, lifestyle, mindset, because our mind has a massive impact on our body. We are what we think. So it's, again, going into sort of de-stress techniques, because cortisol massively affects our hormones as well. And I think that was one of the things that was my problem, was that I had a highly stressful job because I'd been promoted to quite a high level at that point. I had stresses at home with my son who was going through teenage years, but also he was Asperger's, and so had more challenges than usual. And then I was gunning it in the gym with my physio head, and I used to be a gym instructor, saying, right, let's gun it in the gym type thing, let's lose this weight. When actually that's the opposite that women should be doing, because you're raising your cortisol there as well. So you want to be doing sort of low to moderate exercising with Pilates, yoga, cycling, even a brisk walk, can help. And a lot of this is relevant to the guys. So I do get a lot of guys on, listening, like, wow, yeah, you've actually, or they get light bulb moments of, oh, yeah, that's what my wife's going through, or, oh, I can relate to that. I did a workshop for a company that was predominantly men, actually. There was about 4 women and they were all men. And I was quite nervous for that one because I thought, oh, God, what are they all going to make of this? And I think what was really interesting was one of my part of my workshop, I also go through conditions that were often misdiagnosed for. So things like, now I'm definitely not saying there aren't women out there that do have fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, ME, things like that. But I do think particularly women who are going through perimenopause in their sort of 30s, I think doctors that will think, oh, you're far too young, it must be fibro, or you're far too. So I do think we're often misdiagnosed as well, or depression. That's probably the most common one, is depression, that we're, oh, you just stressed, depressed, have some antidepressants, which is what they did with me. So yeah, and I did get, one particular guy was like, oh, my wife's just been diagnosed with ME last week. And I was like, well, obviously I don't know your wife and I don't know her history, and she may well have that, but now you can have that conversation with her doctor. And because I think she was 41 or something like that, so well within the normal age of perimenopause. But doctors are still coming out with it, saying, oh, you're too young, where they're thinking of menopause, which the average age is 51. But if you think about it, perimenopause can last 10, 15 years, usually up to 10, but some have gone more than that.
Yeah.
So if the average age is 51 and then you're going 10, 15 years, it makes sense that 35, 30s is, not so unreasonable.
I'd really like to, if possible, just go way back to when you were younger, because we talk about menopause, and I think there's a distinct similarity between adolescence and when we're teenagers and when we're going through our hormonal changes. And, that involves when we start sort of getting our periods and being hormonal and getting spotty, we really do have to look at our diets as well as we do when we're going through menopause. What were your teenage years like, and were there similarities to your perimenopause and the hormone changes that you've had? Were they completely different, or were they similar?
Perimenopause is just puberty in reverse. So instead of estrogen going up, it's going down. So you do, and this is often why mothers end up clashing with their teenage daughters, because they're going through the same hormones, and often, again, the poor guys are in the middle of all the hormones going everywhere with the wife and with the teenage daughter. So yeah, it is just as important to try, and obviously we don't tend to look after ourselves as teenagers. We don't even think about our diet at that point. But I, looking back, definitely similar symptoms with regards to the mood swings, the spots, acne, although they were a lot worse, I think, in perimenopause. But so there are definitely similarities that it can be. Equally, when we're pregnant, we can have, often I get women say, oh, do you know what? I'm getting the same symptoms. I actually thought I was pregnant because I'm getting the same symptoms as when I was pregnant. And this is why I find it shocking, again, like with dentists, that they don't have a knowledge of menopause, because we get free dental care in the UK when we're pregnant because we're more predisposed to gum problems and tooth loss. It's the same hormones.
Mm.
And yet not, it wasn't mentioned at all. Could it be hormones?
Yeah. Yeah. We
Just
don't
just a
have an
lesson.
easy ride, do we?
No.
We kind of get through, because our hormones start changing when we're like 13, 14. Or well, for me actually, I started my periods when I was 11.
Yeah, I was 11.
So I remember that it wasn't until I fell pregnant that my hormones actually balanced. I didn't feel pregnancy, it wasn't a big hormonal thing that happened for me during pregnancy. And after I gave birth, I was cool for a long time. And you're right, maybe it was in my 30s, but it's just so interesting how there's really only a small period of our lives where maybe our hormones are just balanced on their own. It's interesting. What do you think, like, because you must have, there was a driving force behind you wanting to do this? Like, what was your lowest moment that you kind of thought, I literally cannot pick myself up off the floor, what the hell's going on?
The pinnacle moment when I knew I needed to do something, which I write about in my book. There's a little bit on me in it. And it was when, so I kept being told, I'm just stressed, I'm just depressed, blah, blah, blah. And then I was in a supermarket in the cereal aisle, and I literally had the worst panic attack ever. And I literally had to leave my shopping, all because I was worried I was getting the wrong cereal. It was that pathetic. I mean, it's laughable, over cereal. And I literally left my shopping and I sat in the car, literally my heart pounding, my tears rolling down my face, and I could barely breathe. It felt like my heart was in my throat. And I just sat there going, this is not normal. This is not depression. This is not stress. I've gone from a strong woman to a crumpled mess, is the only way to describe. And I was like, this is ridiculous. And yeah, and that was when I was like, no, I've either got something serious going on, because I thought I had onset dementia. I thought I had all sorts going on at the time, which is what I think is probably the most scariest bit for many women. It's the not knowing what's wrong with them, and they're going to the doctors and the doctors are saying you're normal, or they'll do blood tests, which are often inaccurate during perimenopause because our hormones are fluctuating, hourly, let alone, so often they'll come back as normal, or what is normal. Sometimes they'll say they're normal because they're in range, but they're right at the bottom of the normal range. So then the doctor's saying, oh, well, we're not going to, there's nothing wrong with you, type thing, or give them some antidepressants. And they're just confused. And I think the biggest weight off my shoulders was when I came across the word perimenopause. And I was like, oh my God, that's me. Oh my God, it's a thing, and it's a natural thing, and it's not a progressive thing that I'm going to die from. And that actually eased a lot of my mental anguish, where because I thought I might, be dying of something. And then that's what then led to me going, well, hang on. When I realized, because I spoke to my friends and they were like, they either hadn't heard of it either, or they thought, oh, it's just like menopause, isn't it? You just, and even then, we thought, that's in your 50s, 60s, and mood swings, hot flushes, and that's about it. No knowledge of the fact that there can be, over 100 symptoms, because we've got estrogen receptors in virtually everything. So virtually everything can be affected, from our, itchy ears to metallic taste in your mouth, to changes of taste buds, to, feeling like you've got bugs crawling under your skin, and plantar fasciitis, all sorts of stuff that we just don't realize can be associated with our hormones.
Michelle, if anyone is listening and all of a sudden they've had that aha moment and they've realized that potentially their diet has been impacted, what's the first thing that they should do in that instance?
Definitely sort of have maybe a bit of a food diary to start with. So, because many of us think, oh, yeah, we're eating, okay, or things like that. And then when you actually write it down and realize, you'll see that, oh, actually, I'm having extra chocolate bars or processed food, this, that. So, I mean, always ask your doctor first if there's any reasons that you can't suddenly change your diet suddenly. Always just double check with the health, because obviously I don't know anyone listening all their background. Definitely sort of looking into what are you buying? Are you buying foods that are processed? Are you buying foods that, if you look on the back, if it's got a word that you can't pronounce, then it's not the most freshest of ingredients. So just trying to cut back on things that are processed, like white bread, pastries, things like that, and just trying to cook from scratch if you can. And I appreciate that sometimes that takes more time, and some of us have like busy lifestyles, but the more that you can eat from scratch, cook from scratch, the chances are the less inflammatory it will be. So that's probably my biggest advice, is just sort of trying to cook from ingredients as opposed to something that's pre-made.
You've obviously got some exciting stuff happening. Tell us all about all the exciting things that are happening to you right now.
I've got a number of prisons that have now contacted me, because my mission is I want to try and get into female prisons to try and help female prisoners, because I can't think of anything worse than hormonal women in confined spaces. So not understanding. So I've got that coming on. I'm
Oh,
teaching trainee GPs next week for the second time,
amazing.
second cohort. So I was very
Brilliant.
pleased to be asked to come back. So yeah, so we can get our new GPs coming through with more knowledge on menopause.
Tell us about your podcast.
It's called Menopause, The Real Deal. So I've had guests that are from top gynecologists, nutritionalists, holistic approaches. So lots of different ways so professionals that help women in lots of different ways, because it's not a one fits all. So some women might be wanting to go more down the holistic route. We've then got business owners that it's where menopause has affected their workforce, from absenteeism to low productivity, even presenteeism, where women just aren't quite as productive. I had one lady where, blessed, due to having to have one of her ovaries removed as an early teenager, she ended up going through perimenopause when she should have been going through puberty. So we've got some, real stories on how that's, impacted her life, how confusing it was, because particularly back then, nobody mentioned menopause, let alone to a teenager. So, it was only that she realized she was going through the same as her mother, or her mother realized she was going through the same as her, that the penny dropped what was going on. But yeah, so we've had some really, really great guests, lots of tips and advice, and lots of aha moments for our listeners.
That is amazing, and I think that the work you're doing is brilliant. Just touching upon the prison stuff, I think it's quite interesting how, if you are in a confined space and you are going through the menopause, how that can be amplified. And obviously, the women that you're working with are trying to better themselves to come back out into the community. And if they can't be the best version of themselves going through that process, they're not going to be able to come back out into the community being better, a better person, or having learned from what they've obviously previously done to obviously have been convicted and been in prison. So I think that work is really important. I am so excited to listen to your podcast as well. I think it's going to be informative. I think you're going to have loads of people joining you and listening, because menopause is just the hot topic. And so many women are struggling with their hormones, their perimenopause symptoms, and going through menopause. So thank you so much for everything you're doing. Good luck with your kind of workshops and training. And I'm sure that we will be speaking again soon. Menopause is such an important part of my life. It was so interesting when I started going through my menopause, and when I got help, and when I was told that some of my symptoms were directly linked to the food that I was eating. It really did shock me. And I know quite a lot. I ask questions. I'm really curious. So we're not asking those questions, then we don't know. And I think it's really surprising that we're not talking about the link between the menopause and our hormone changes and the food that we're eating, and how it's affecting how we're feeling, how we're thinking, and how our gut health is responding to our brain. Every time I have a conversation with another woman, it's part of their lives, or they have that aha moment of, that's why I'm feeling the way I am, or maybe it's the menopause. So the conversation with Michelle really made me feel a sense of empowerment to be able to share this episode with you, so that you might have that aha moment too. Guys, if you have enjoyed this episode and you've enjoyed the content in this episode, it is really important that you follow. If you're using Apple Podcast, that's my listening platform. I love it. It's so easy to use. There's a little plus sign. You just tap it and you start following it. And if you follow, then you know what? You will not miss an episode. And if you download the episodes, if you found them interesting, you can then re-listen to them again, because that's what I do. When I really find something that interests me or really makes me think, oh God, I need to go back and listen to that, it's exactly what I do. So you can either listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify also. It's a little plus button. Just hit plus and you can follow us, and you won't miss another episode. Each week I interview a guest, and then I give you a bonus coaching episode where I will delve into one of the topics that we've discussed, but really give you some coaching. We talk about our emotions and our feelings and how we can navigate our journeys and the different challenges we have. So if you have liked this episode, you can join me for my midweek episode of Real Women's Stories.